Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dylan Ryder from the Johnson County Library's Career and Finance Committee. Thanks for joining us for our very first Women in Money Mondays. We have the privilege to be joined by Kathy Brown from the Kansas Securities Commission office, who will be sharing how the Kansas Securities Office and Kansas Department of Insurance work to protect Kansas consumers. But first, I'd like you to take a quick moment to ask you a few poll questions. If you could please share with us how you came across this program, as well as your home zip code. That information is a huge help to us in terms of marketing, planning, and knowing whom we're helping. While you're answering those poll questions, I'd like to offer you a quick tour of the presentation interface. To the left, you'll see a link to the Johnson County Library website. You'll also see a presenter video and then a Q&A module to add your program-related questions. In the center, that'll be the presentation area, which will contain presentation slides, poll questions and results, and some links following the program. Over on the right, you'll see presenter biographical info and credentials, a resource list, which will contain websites referenced in the program, and other helpful information for you to bookmark and review following the presentation. If you would prefer fewer active windows on your screen or would like to enlarge any of the windows, simply use the controls in the upper right of that window or the resizing option in the lower right of that window. If you've closed a module and wish to see it again, just click on the applicable button located in the bottom center of your screen. Incidentally, if any of you are still hearing the lobby music, simply refresh this web page and that problem should go away. If the problem persists or you experience any other technical difficulties with the interface, either click the help icon or submit a question in the Q&A. Now feel free to participate in our discussion by using that Q&A module to add your comments and questions. Kathy will address questions as time allows following her presentation. The contents of this program will be recorded for future viewing. Now, I'd like to turn things over to JCL's Careers and Personal Finance Librarian, Marty Johannes. Good evening, Marty.
Hello, Dylan, and thank you. Also, thank you to all of you for joining us for the first of 9 Women and Money Mondays. The Women and Money series was developed by Housing and Credit Counseling, Inc. Johnson County Libraries had the privilege to begin partnering with HCCI in 2014 to make this series available to our patrons each year in the fall. And this year, recognizing that men and women alike could benefit from the information, especially during these challenging times, we decided to make the series inclusive to all and to rebrand it with a fancy new logo. Due to COVID-19, the entire series is being offered online. Now, one silver lining of the pandemic preventing us from meeting in person and forcing us to go virtual is that we're able to expand our reach beyond our metro area. And we're also able to make the recordings of the online programs available to those who aren't able to join us live. Perhaps those who may be watching a Chiefs game. But this program is the first of the Women and Money Mondays. To see a full schedule and to register for the individual programs, go to the Johnson County Library website at jocolibrary.org. And now I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn Stanley, the Executive Director of HCCI, to say a few words.
Thank you, Marty. I am so glad that everyone's taken their time to join us here tonight. Comparing the Chiefs game, how about learning about money instead? Actually, I personally enjoy that much better. Let me tell you just briefly about Housing and Credit Counseling, Inc. Some of you may know us as HCCI. Our mission is to counsel and educate all people to achieve their housing and financial goals. We are a HUD-approved, organization. So that consists of exams that our counselors are all HUD exam certified, as well as a lot of other credentials. So our one-on-one counseling includes budgeting, debt repayment, credit reports, student loans, mortgage default, medical debt, tenant and landlord issues. For instance, if we teach people their rights and their responsibilities based on the Kansas Residential Landlord Tenant Act, Fair Housing, and local codes and ordinances, and also home ownership counseling and education classes. Right now, interest rates are low, so a lot of people are refinancing houses, and a lot of people actually purchasing homes if they've got a stable job and good credit history. So a lot of things happening there. Well, please do remember that participating in this class, you're entitled to a free one-on-one counseling session. We are offering those by telephone or by Zoom, and we're not booked that long. Actually, if you called us tomorrow when our office hours are open, we could probably have you even scheduled the next day. So I hope I'll encourage you to do that sooner than later. We enjoy financial checkups so that make sure everybody's got all the resources and everything ready to go for their financial future. And now I want to introduce you. Well, first, let me tell you about our sponsors. We have the Office of the State Bank Commissioner has provided funding through a generous grant for the Monday night classes. And we are so happy we could not do it without our contributions and sponsors for all of these educational programs. Thank you, Office of the State Bank Commissioner. And now I'd like to tell you a little bit about Kathy Brown, Chief of Compliance for the Office of the Kansas Securities Commissioner. Kathy is responsible for the supervision of exams on broker-dealers and investment advisors doing business in Kansas, as well as investigations for compliance. Kathy began her regulatory career with the Office of the Securities Commissioner in 2017. Prior to that, Kathy served over 20 years with Edward Jones as an investment representative and in their compliance legal department as a senior investigator. Kathy currently serves on the Investment Advisor Operations Committee for the North American Securities Administrators Association. So please join me in welcoming Kathy Brown.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm coming to you from the Kansas Insurance Department. And as many of you may already be aware, the Office of the Kansas Securities Commissioner became a division of the Insurance Department in July of 2017. On behalf of Insurance Commissioner Vicki Schmidt and on behalf of Securities Commissioner Jeff Wagaman, I'm very happy to be able to be here with you tonight and hopefully share some information that you'll find useful. As we did last year, I'm going to touch on some of the basics of investing, but I'm also going to cover a little bit more about risk and how to manage risk, and introduce a little bit of a new topic as we talk about fraud and maybe how that might look to you as a potential investor so that maybe you can protect yourself from having some of that occur and fall into some of the traps that might be out there. We have a lot of people who try to commit some fraud, and we want to protect as best we can. So Kansas was the first state to implement securities laws, securities regulations, and they called them blue sky laws, and this was in 1911. So we go back quite a ways, and we have a big history here in the state of Kansas as it relates to security regulation. And so really, how do we do that, and how does it look? Well, we encourage investors to check the registration status of companies and persons that are offering securities and investments and investment advice in Kansas. We investigate potential violations of state securities laws and regulations. And in the Office of the Kansas Securities Commissioner, we're kind of broken up into two parts under one director, one being compliance, which is the side that I'm on, that deals with all registered individuals. And then we have enforcement. So for those people who are being presented with securities that may not be properly registered, or for individuals who are selling those types of securities that may not be properly registered. We also investigate that. We also advocate for the prosecution of individuals who commit securities fraud. We handle in-house, our legal team handles, and our securities commissioner will handle administrative type issues. We also handle in-house civil type of proceedings. If we do determine it escalates to a criminal type status, we work with the AG's office to assist with that. We also provide investor education resources to the public. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. And obviously, we're involved with registering broker-dealers, agents of broker-dealers, investment advisors, and investment advisors representatives, and also registering securities offerings unless they fall into a proper exemption. So let's talk about investing a little bit, and we kind of have an own versus a loan type of scenario. And when we're talking about stocks, what are we talking about? Well, it's an ownership interest in a company. So this is the own part of it. So you buy stock, maybe you're doing this online with a brokerage account through a financial professional. But there's a couple of different kinds. There's common stock, which gives you a right to vote. But it will be the last to be paid if the company were to file bankruptcy. Preferred stock, you don't necessarily have a right to vote, but you will receive preference if, in fact, the company were to not do so well. So why would you buy stock? Well, obviously, you buy stock in hopes that the price is going to go up. You're going to see some appreciation of that investment. You might own a stock that actually pays some type of dividend, possibly quarterly or however they might set that out. And it adds to some diversification in your total portfolio as you're building that. And we'll talk a little more about diversification as we go on as well. So what falls into loan? Well, that would be bonds. So what does it mean to own a bond? Well, basically an investor is going to loan money to an entity who wants to collect funds for a defined purpose, for a defined period of time. And what they usually do is say, for that period of time that you own the bond, we're going to pay you some type of fixed interest rate. So there's different kinds. It might be a corporate bond. Maybe there's a corporation trying to raise money to expand, to do different things. Government bonds that are, trying to raise funds to do certain things within municipalities. A lot of municipal bonds might be state or local governments, but those often provide you with a tax break, either federally and some federal and state. You might have schools trying to raise money, all of those types of things. Junk bonds are also involved. Those are the more high risk, maybe not as highly rated, not very much of an investment grade type of investment. So there could be some more risk with that. So why do you buy bonds? Well, it's going to add to the diversification of your portfolio. It can lower the risk that you're exposing your funds to, and it can provide, in some instances, the tax exemption and a little bit of a tax break if you fall into a higher tax bracket where that benefits you. So mutual funds are another kind of investment we're going to talk about, and basically this is a professionally managed pool of funds. So they collect everybody's money together and they allocate that out to a portfolio of a variety of stocks, and mutual funds will hold a different type of number of stocks and different types of stocks. There's different fund classes and shares that you can purchase the mutual funds with. The A shares, you pay an upfront fee, but when you sell it, there's not a fee. The B shares, you don't pay a fee up front, and as long as you hold it for a particular period of time, you can sell it usually without a fee. They call that a contingent deferred sales charge, where if you sell it within a period of time, that charge goes down every year that you've owned it. The C shares, they pay constant yearly fees. Some C shares, if you hold them for so long, then you don't have to pay a fee. So again, the question is, why buy mutual funds? Again, it adds to diversification. And really, when you buy mutual funds, you almost have instant diversification because your money goes into buying a variety of stocks that are within that particular fund. And they can do different things for you, provide growth in income, whatever your objective is. And so you can own a lot of different securities for a much smaller investment. So then we have exchange traded funds, or ETFs, and a lot of you may be hearing about these. And there's a lot of different types of exchange traded funds. They're very similar to a mutual fund. However, some may follow an index, some may follow some type of commodity, or maybe it's a bond traded fund. But it's a basket of assets, very much like an index fund would be, like a mutual fund. But unlike a mutual fund, an ETF trades like a stock. So it's going to execute at the end of the day. You can sell it throughout the course of the day, where a mutual fund, you can only execute at the end of the day once they determine what all the stocks within the mutual fund have done. So an ETF will trade very much like a stock, but it still gives you the diversification of owning a lot of different things within that particular holding. So it is a good way to, again, diversify and, spread your interest across various types of indexes and commodities or bonds and various objectives. So how are the ETFs and the mutual funds different? Again, like I said, ETFs trade during the day like a stock. A mutual fund is going to trade at the closing, at the NAV, which is net asset value. So when you buy a mutual fund, you pay a public offering price. When you sell a mutual fund, you receive the net asset value. The net asset value is determined with what all the stocks within that mutual fund have done throughout the day, and then they determine what the price of the mutual fund is at the end of the day. So mutual funds only trade at the closing. ETFs have a little bit lower operating expense. Mutual funds, their operating expenses can vary. So you definitely want to take a look at what type of mutual fund you're buying and what those expenses may be, because that will affect your overall return. With an ETF, there's generally no investment minimums. You just want to make it cost effective because you're probably going to pay some type of commission. With a mutual fund, generally they're going to start with anywhere from a $25 minimum to a $50 minimum, depending on the mutual fund, but there may be some minimum investments and some could be higher. So you just want to look at the particular mutual fund you're interested in. ETFs are a little more tax efficient. Obviously, you're not going to incur any potential capital gain until you actually liquidate it. Where with a mutual fund, it can be a little bit less tax efficient because there's going to be capital gains that take place within the portfolio management. If you were to exchange within the same fund family to just a different fund that they offer, that is viewed as a liquidation. And again, you could incur some capital gain taxes. So just have to understand what you're doing and make sure that the person that is assisting you with those investments is explaining those potential liabilities. Also, again, as we said, the ETFs, you're going to pay a commission or transaction fee. And on the mutual fund, it goes back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, the different share classes. So those may vary as far as what the sales loads may be that are involved with that. So those are some variations and some differences between the two. But again, they both offer a good way to diversify, and you just have to look at what might work best for your potential objectives and what you're trying to achieve with your investments. Let me go back here real quick before we skip on. But other types of securities that you may not think about actually are considered securities, and that's being investment contracts, assignments, and oil and gas leases, or even promissory notes in some instances. Kansas ranks 11th in oil production and 15th in gas production. And so we see a lot of assignments in oil and gas leases, investment in gas production, those types of things. And some of that can be fraudulent. And so we look at that very closely as to what's going on. And when we see those type of investments, we do ask a lot of questions and we check on those. So these are some additional types of investments that you may not just ordinarily think as being securities. So I said we were going to talk a little bit about risk tolerance, and I think it's always important to have a good sense of what your risk tolerance is when you start investing. We all have varying degrees of what we're willing to tolerate when we invest our money. Some of the things to think about, and really risk tolerance is just really a measurement of that, and what's your awareness of your level of comfort or discomfort when the market's going to swing, and you're going to see declines in the value of investments and obviously increases, and that's what we prefer to see. So some things that you might want to consider is just really your existing personal situation. So, what type of things are you most comfortable with? What is your present frame of mind before you're investing? And what's your investment experience, your knowledge? What's your background? And what type of investments are you familiar with? And what might you be more comfortable with investing and trying to work towards diversifying your portfolio? So this is a good illustration, I think, on what the trade-offs between risk and return is. Kind of an inverse relationship. Obviously, as you have the potential for more return, sometimes with that potential comes higher risk. And so you have to kind of decide where you fall within this. So if you look at the very base of this pyramid, you see these certificates of deposit, money market accounts, U.S. agency securities, those type of things. So obviously far lower risk, but also with that, you're going to have a much lower potential for return. Your rate of return is not going to be as potentially substantial as maybe if you took on a little more risk. So as you move up the pyramid, and if we want to just jump to the top there, some of the things that might give you the potentially greatest return, but also some of the biggest risk would be the precious metals, options, those type of things that also take along with it not only the risk, but also some expertise and some knowledge and some experience that you want to have with you to really move into those type of things. So really, when you're talking about risk and what your risk tolerance is, you have to consider all of these things to include, like I said, primarily, I think, a lot of your experience and what you understand and where your level of knowledge and comfort is. So what are the things that you should be thinking about when you're trying to determine your risk tolerance? Well, what are some considerations? Well, obviously your age. I think when you're younger, you have the ability to take on more risk. You have a lot more time to be invested in the market. So those market swings that you might endure, you have time to recover from. So age is a real, I think, a top consideration. That investment time horizon for the invested money. Do you have a short time to invest? Do you have a long-term time to invest? Some of that may consider how long do you have to retirement? Is this for retirement? Are you trying to just have some quick return where you want to turn your investment around in a short-term basis? So all of that has to come into consideration. Available funds. So how much can you afford to tie up? What do you have available in the form of emergencies? The last thing you want to do is invest your money, have an emergency come up and have to liquidate those investments when maybe it's not the most opportune time to do so. So always make sure that you have available an emergency fund in case you need to access it, and consider that when you're investing. The costs and fees of investing. So always ask, and we'll get into this a little more too, is what is the cost? What are the fees associated? Every little bit can add up and affect your overall return. So even 0.5% can add up over a long period of time and affect your overall return. And then again, just overall your comfort level with taking on risk. And again, that is such an individual situation. All of us probably have different answers to these thoughts and these considerations. And so just think for yourself what you can tolerate and what you believe you can be comfortable with in your investments. So we've talked a little bit about diversification and diversifying your portfolio when I was talking about the different kinds of investments, but really kind of what all does that mean and how can you maybe accomplish that? So it's basically diversifying your securities within different kinds of investments and different kinds of asset classes. So if you properly diversify your portfolio, spreading it out between stocks and bonds, when the market isn't performing well, stocks and bonds have kind of an inverse relationship to one another. So when stocks are performing well, maybe bonds don't perform as well, and vice versa. So when you diversify your portfolio and you invest in different kinds of investments in stocks and bonds, and you hold a little bit of everything within your portfolio, when the market isn't doing well and certain areas of the market aren't performing well, hopefully your portfolio will still hold up overall and move through in a positive way through that kind of market fluctuation that is going on. You can also, some people are more comfortable just owning stocks, and you can do a mixture of assets within your portfolio that allow you to invest in all stocks, but maybe diversify your stocks into different sectors of the economy. So maybe you want to invest in stocks that are involved with banking and maybe food industry, maybe energy, and you want to diversify because all of those sectors of the economy do different things at different times. So that's another way of diversifying if what you're most comfortable with is keeping everything in stocks. So those are just things to consider as you're moving through building your portfolio. And again, as we talked about earlier with mutual funds, you kind of almost get an instant, immediate diversification because you're spread out over so many different kinds of stocks. And really, it would take quite a lot for all of those stocks to perform badly for really you to have too much risk exposure. So you want to consider all of those things, and certainly keep in mind that nothing that you're investing in is going to be 100% guaranteed. There's always risk with everything that you invest with. So you want to kind of hedge that risk by diversifying your portfolio. So keep that in consideration as you're talking to, looking at building your portfolio or talking to an investment representative to assist you with your investments. So let's talk a little bit about retirement. So some of the things in various investment retirement vehicles that you may come across as you're building your savings. Maybe some of you are already into some of these types of investments, and that's fantastic. It's a great way to start building towards your retirement and have some tax deferral while you're building that, which just adds to your growth. So the first thing I thought we would talk about in general is the 401k, which is a private company employee retirement type of savings plan. It's set up by your employer. Usually employers will match up to a certain percentage. You can generally set it up to where it comes automatically out of your paychecks. It's overseen by a third-party administrator who handles all of the paperwork and the investing and all of the work that has to be done to keep the plan rolling. 401ks are pre-tax money. They grow tax deferred, which again, like I just said a minute ago, gives you that added benefit of additional growth. Your contributions and earnings are taxed as income when you are able to take it out and qualify to take it out. And if you take it out before the qualified time, which is usually after you're 59 and a half, or once you leave your employee plan, you might have penalties. There are Roth 401ks now, and most of what I've just said applies. However, the contributions are usually taxed at the time, and but when you go to withdraw the money from the Roth 401k, you don't get taxed because you've already paid the taxes. So keep in mind when you're doing a 401k plan that you want to max out the matching. So if your employer is going to match up to a certain percentage, make sure you're putting enough to maximize that matching, because that is just putting free money to work for you and getting additional money in your savings for retirement, and it's going to add up over time. So always take that into consideration. And we have some resources that we'll show you later, but the Department of Labor actually oversees 401k plans and all of these processes. And so we'll give you that information to look at that more in depth if you have some more specific questions about 401ks in general. So maybe something you're a little more familiar with, and that's the individual retirement accounts. There's the traditional and there's the Roth. You do this on your own. You can set up, and if we talk about the traditional first, you can set up the individual traditional IRA account with an individual brokerage firm. You can set it up at a bank. A lot of banks now offer this kind of product for you to set up. They may be limited on what you can invest in, but you can go with a brokerage. Investment advisor can assist you to find a way to set that up and get a plan going for you. The yearly contribution limits will vary depending on your age. It does have income limitations on the contributions to your account. Investment earnings are tax-free until withdrawn. So in other words, you get a tax deferral. So you're getting that additional growth because while it's growing, you're not having to incur taxes. Qualifies withdrawals of all monies or taxes ordinary income once you withdraw it. And for traditional IRAs, that's after you're 59 and a half. And penalties could apply if you take the money early, okay? So with a Roth IRA, few differences, and again, set up the same way. You can go to you can set up by the individual. You can go to a brokerage, investment advisor, a bank. Yearly contributions are going to vary again, depending on your age, income, all of that. But the contributions are taxed as ordinary income. So you pay the taxes as you're making the investments. You don't get the tax break on a Roth IRA contribution. The investment earnings are still going to grow tax deferred. However, penalties are applied if monies are taken before you're 59 and a half. But when you are able to withdraw the money, once it's qualified withdrawals, it does come out tax-free. So with a Roth, you don't get the tax break when you put it in, but you do get to take it out tax-free. So let's talk a little bit about for 2019 and 2020, your total contributions to your traditional and Roth IRAs can't be more than $6,000, $7,000 if you're age 50 or older, or your taxable compensation for the year if your compensation is less than the dollar limit. So obviously, for you to be able to make a contribution, you have to have taxable income. Again, a reminder, you're required to take withdrawals from your traditional IRA at 70 and a half. These are called a requirement minimum distribution, or an RMD. Some of you may have heard that, but you will be required with a traditional IRA to start taking those at 70 and a half. Why? Because obviously the IRS wants to start getting their money. And when you take distributions from your traditional IRA, as we said earlier, you're going to get taxed as ordinary income. The Roth IRA does not require these minimum withdrawals until after the death of the owner. Of course, then you would have to decide how that would be distributed to the named beneficiaries on the retirement plan. So those are a few differences and a few things to keep in mind as you're going through making the decision as to which might work best for you. You may want to talk to your tax preparer and decide which type of plan, a traditional or Roth, might be more beneficial to you. So investing for the future, well, when's the best time to start? Well, time in the market is your best advantage. So the earlier, the better. Some of us don't have as many more years to retirement, but every little bit that you can put away and continue to contribute to on a regular basis is going to benefit you. I just got a quick little chart up here. If you can see that clearly, putting in $200 a month for various years at a very reasonable rate of return, if you're able to achieve at least 4%, just what that could add up to by the time you're age 65. So the sooner the better, but even if you just started today, every little bit that you put in grows and helps. And if you put it into a retirement type of plan, that's going to grow tax deferred, which gives you even more benefit for your money. So just food for thought here. When is the best time to start? That would be now. So some of the thought as we move into retirement, generally speaking, for most retirees, Social Security is still the foundation of their retirement income. It's providing anywhere from a third of the income for retirees up to 80% of their retirement. just under a third of retirees receive income from a traditional type of pension or a planned retirement type of savings account, so an IRA that they've planned for. So keep this in mind. Social Security may not be sufficient wholly in for all of us. So having that additional income that may come from setting up this outside retirement savings plan can be a huge benefit. So some of these terms that we hear, an investment advisor, a financial planner, broker dealer, what do all these things mean? Let's see if I can go through a few of them anyway to give you some clarification on to who's who. So a registered investment advisor, that's a firm. So a firm that's selling their investment advisory services that's registered by the state. An investment advisor representative is the individual that's registered by the state. So you have the firm and you have the individual. The individual is going to work for a registered investment advisor that's going to manage accounts for clients, investment securities with advice and recommendations. A financial planner is going to give financial planning services with the designation of a certified financial planner. And they're going to look at your total financial planning from insurance needs to estate planning to investment planning. They look at everything and provide you an assistance and a plan to start moving towards the goals that you want to achieve. An insurance agent, of course, they're licensed to sell insurance products. And in the state of Kansas, an annuity, including a variable annuity, is not considered a security. It falls under the insurance side. But obviously, those cross paths a lot of times. A lot of the investment advisor representatives will sometimes also be insurance licensed and to provide those needs as well. So what's a registered representative? They're individuals that carries either a Series 6 or 7 license. They're kind of more known as a stockbroker. A registered representative is going to be an agent of a broker-dealer instead of an investment advisor. So hopefully that'll give you a little bit of clarification on some of those terms that you come across. So how do you know who the right person is to work with? Well, I think first of all, you have to decide just exactly what are the services that you need. So are you a buy and hold kind of person? You want to buy a few stocks or a mutual fund and you plan on holding it for the long term? You may find that you would benefit more from an agent of a broker-dealer. They're transactionally based, and you may actually pay out less than working with an investment advisor. An investment advisor is going to be a fee-based type of service, and they're going to trade your account more regularly, provide you active management of your resources and your assets, and they're going to charge you a fee based on your assets under management. So you kind of just have to decide how your thought is, how you want to approach your investments, and what might be most cost effective for you. You may want to use referrals. A lot of your friends may have some suggestions on who would be a great person to talk to. Interview potential service providers. Just reach out to people and see who you feel like you connect with and who you believe offers the type of services that you're looking for. Internet research, we all know there's a lot of information out there, so check it out. You can also go to our website at insurance.kansas.gov or finra.org. Finra.brokercheck is also another one where you can actually check the broker dealers, investment advisors that you're interested in using to see if there's been problems, if there's been deficiencies or disclosures that were reported against these particular individuals to see if that's who you want to work with. So those are some things to keep in mind as you're trying to find that person. So if you're going to talk to an investment advisor about, and before you maybe sign on the dotted line to use their services, what maybe should you ask them about? Well, I think you want to know what you're going to be charged. So is it an investment advisor that's going to charge a fee? Is there also going to be some kind of commission associated with the transaction? What brokerage firm would they use to facilitate your transactions? You want to look at the agreement that they're going to have you execute and take time to take a look at it. Ask some questions. Are they going to provide you with a quarterly report? And if they are, who's preparing that quarterly report? Are they preparing it? or is it coming from the brokerage firm, the custodian who's holding your investments? Are they going to actively manage your investments, or is it going to be transactional? What's their criteria for selecting securities to invest in? How do they make their investment decisions to make those recommendations? Are they doing their own research, or are they relying on another firm to provide certain strategies and models that they want to adhere to? So ask the questions, and then I think get a better picture on what you actually would be signing up for if you elect to go with them. And if they're not able to give you the answers to some of these questions, maybe that should be a red flag to you, and maybe it's time, maybe you should check with a few other individuals. You certainly want to be comfortable with working with the individual who's going to manage your money. And how will you pay for services? We've covered a little bit of this. So percentage of assets under management, a lot of times that will be a investment advisor. It's basically a fee-based type of situation where they're charging based on assets under management. If you're working with an agent of a broker-dealer, you may pay commissions based on the transactions that are being affected in your account. There could be set fees. So if you're working with a financial planner, they may charge an hourly fee, a fixed fee. There could be some brokerage fees. There could be some mutual fund fees. So you want to make sure you get a total picture of exactly what you're paying for. Because as we said earlier, all the fees that you pay affect your return. So you want to understand what you're going to be paying for, and does that make sense for you and what you're trying to accomplish. So I think what we're going to talk about now is we're going to shift to talking about fraud and how can you maybe protect yourself a little bit as it relates to fraud. And one of the general premises of fraud is affinity fraud. And it's basically schemes that involves a scammer who's going to kind of infiltrate themselves into the community or a group and get to know someone, build trust within that person. Maybe they join your church, or they get to know you through a community interest group, or country clubs, or professional organizations. And I think you have to keep in mind that just because you know someone, or you think you know someone, or they're part of your church, that doesn't make them automatically trustworthy to invest with, or warrants you maybe ignoring the red flags that may come up by things that they're telling you. So I think affinity fraud is kind of the basis for a lot of frauds, and we're going to talk about some of the top investor threats for 2020. Nassau put theirs together, and that's the North American Securities Administrators Association. And their top frauds were promissory notes, Ponzi pyramid schemes, I'll talk here in a minute, real estate investments, cryptocurrency, social media, investment frauds. And as you can look at the top threats for 2020 for the Office of the Kansas Securities Commissioner, many are very similar. We do have oil and gas. As I said earlier, Kansas ranks 11th in oil production, 15th in gas production. So we do see a lot of oil and gas fraud out there. Ponzi pyramid schemes, promissory notes, unregistered private offerings, high-risk type stocks, and again, the affinity fraud, the real estate investments, precious metals, those type of things. So let's talk about the promissory notes. Basically, it's someone offering to pay you a high interest rate to have you loan them money, and they promise to pay it back to you in a short period of time. A lot of times these promissory notes are in the duration of 9 months or less. Those are probably the source of most of the fraudulent activity. We've had instances where, we've had investment advisors and broker-dealer agents and broker-dealers borrow money from their clients on the premise that they were trying to expand their business or trying to make these other investments that might be of interest. And they borrow money from the clients. They are paying them a better rate than maybe what they can find out there currently. And let's face it, the rates are still low. So anytime you see something at a higher rate, it can spark your interest. In our case, our person who borrowed all the money never paid any of it back. And we now went after that individual criminally through the AG's office, and he was prosecuted and no longer registered, obviously, and is on probation and will never be registered again. Keep in mind, this doesn't include notes that you might get through your actual banking facility, your bank and lending organizations. Those are obviously legitimate. But keep in mind, if someone's asking to borrow money, especially if they're supposed to be advising you on investing, and are going to offer you a large, substantial rate of return in comparison to what's currently out there, it may be a red flag for you to be wary of maybe entering into that type of agreement. Ponzi schemes, pyramid schemes, basically the underlying investment claims are entirely generally fictional. It's a multi-layer thing, and generally what happens is they're paying such a high return that eventually the pyramid begins to collapse. They can't keep it up. So if they can't keep money coming into the pyramid scheme and the Ponzi scheme, then it generally will collapse. We had an individual in the Wichita area that was promoting investing in concrete, and he could do concrete jobs, and he was getting all his church friends, and this included his pastor, and there was no concrete to be had. He was just taking people's money and using it to buy large homes, buy fancy cars. Eventually that collapsed, and we are still in the process of prosecuting that individual. Real estate investments, again, this is quick money through real estate investments. Two of the most popular are, borrowing money to invest in properties, property flipping. A lot of times, there's generally not any legitimate investment going on. And this is another area that, the promises of quick money through these types of investments are generally very risky and generally are based in fraudulent promises. The cryptocurrency is something probably just came onto the scene in 2017 strongly. A lot of you probably have heard of it, the Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency. This is a situation where, everybody was going to make lots of money. They were throwing money into it. And the problem was it was very difficult to get your money out of it. There's no real backing to the value of Bitcoin. It's hard to track. They use what's called blockchain. It can be very hard to find the origination of all of this. It's hard to get your money out, as I said. These generally fall under the CFTC, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. However, the SEC did rule that some of the initial coin offerings, which is kind of like an initial public offering of a stock, could fall potentially into the SEC. But as a broad view of this, it's extremely risky, very speculative. It doesn't really fall very neatly into any particular federal or state regulatory framework. And I would say, unless you are very experienced and understand fully what the risks are, this is an area that you might want to refrain from. So be mindful of those as you're seeing that. The social media, we all know, we all use all the various social media. One thing that I will just say that, again, it's a lot like the affinity. People get into your social networks. They become, you believe, friends, somebody that you have things in common with. You begin to trust them. And then they access potential information, sometimes online. And it can be very risky. And one thing that I would say is to just avoid getting into conversations if you get contacted or if somebody is sending you messages and asking questions, to just really hesitate getting into a conversation, because what you may find if you enter into a conversation that you may be providing them information you didn't even realize you were giving them. So just refrain from that. Some of the romance scams are out there. A lot of people get embarrassed by, all of these frauds that we've just talked about, because they feel like, well, how could I have fallen for that? They get embarrassed, they don't report it. But please, if any of these scams come up, or even if someone just approaches you with it, report it, make us aware of it. And if you feel like you've become a victim of a scam, please let us know. The other thing I think very current, the COVID scams, there's no COVID insurance. The online tests are generally probably not based on anything legitimate. There are no COVID vaccinations, so if you're being contacted about that. This has also opened the door to unemployment fraud. A lot of you have probably heard about people fictitiously filing unemployment under other people's names. We've even had it happen to those of us in our insurance department and in the office of the Kansas Securities Commissioner. So be aware, watch your accounts, check your mail, read what you're receiving, and just if you think anything suspicious is happening, report it. The bottom line is this: don't act too quickly. Everything is going to have risk. So if they're telling you it's all guaranteed, there's no risk, that should be a red flag to you. Trust but verify. We know that sometimes friends bring things to your attention. Just ask the questions, be informed, make an informed decision. And if it sounds too good to be true, it most likely is. Always ask the person and always ask if the person in the security is registered. And if you're not sure, give us a call and we'll check on that for you. And if you think you're a victim to fraud, contact your state securities regulator. Let us know about it. Let us be of help to you, and let us do some investigating to see exactly what might be going on. Even if you feel like you shouldn't have fallen for it, maybe you're a little embarrassed. We see this all the time. We want to be there to help you. And if we can put a stop to it and end it so other people aren't at risk, that's what we'd like to do. So questions, we'll open it up. One thing I will say, you'll notice that there's a smartinvestks.com on here. That is new. It's set up to provide education to the public. It's an investment or information service. So please go out and check it out and see if it's got some things out there for you.
Well, Kathy, I'd just like to say how much I appreciate you being here with us this evening to share that financial info overview and a glimpse of the just all the excellent work being done behind the scenes to help keep Kansans safe. We've received some great questions, some about investing, some about insurance during your presentation. But as we move into the Q&A portion of the program, you all will be seeing some polling questions coming across your screens. So if you could please take the time to answer those polls while Kathy fields your questions, that'd be much appreciated. Kathy, are you ready to take some questions?
I'm ready. Let's see if I can help. I'll do my best.
All right. I believe in you. Oh, for starters, can you explain what you meant earlier by tax efficient regarding ETF and mutual funds?
Yes. So with ETFs, because they trade like a stock, as long as you're holding it, you're not going to incur taxes. If you were to liquidate it and have a gain, you would then incur a potential capital gain, either short-term or long-term, depending on how long you'd owned it. With a mutual fund, within the construction of that mutual fund, the professional money manager is going to be making regular changes to the holdings within that mutual fund. So there can be capital gains taking place because of the professional money manager buying and selling different stocks within the portfolio. It could be because you've elected to exchange from one, maybe a growth fund to a growth and income fund, and that is viewed and for tax purposes as a buy and a sell. So you could have a potential capital gain there. So you could have short-term, long-term, and capital gains that you really didn't even initiate yourself. But because of the structure of it, it happens because of how it's being professionally managed. I hope that answers that question for you.
That's great. And I'm seeing from our first poll result here, people as a whole feel more confident about investing. So you're off to a good start.
Wonderful.
So our next question, what's the general rule of thumb to investing when you have outstanding debt, so student loans, auto loans, credit cards, et cetera, why would someone choose to invest when they're in that situation?
Well, we talked about time in the market. So the longer you can, even if it's a small amount of money to put aside every month, that's going to grow over time, and it's going to provide a great base for your savings, for investing. Even if you have to start with a savings account, start putting money aside. It's always good to reduce your debt, and you need to focus on that, especially as a younger person trying to get out of student loans, credit card debt. All of that is absolutely important to reduce, but try to keep a small amount of money that you're putting away every month, whether it's to put $25 into a mutual fund or a savings account, or to start that savings and get it building, because over time it's going to add up and you're going to resolve that debt, but you're going to have that start with your savings account going, and you'll be in a good place moving forward.
All right, another great question here. Unfortunately, probably applies to a lot of people. My husband and I were both laid off back in April. We're back at work now, thank goodness, but behind on everything. Should we take money from my 401k, a smaller balance, or my husband, who has built up more?
Take money, take a withdrawal from it?
Right.
Okay. I wouldn't recommend, if you can avoid it, to withdraw from your savings accounts. If it's in a 401k or an IRA, if you can avoid it, I would say try your best to not withdraw. If there's another savings to pull from, I would do that if you have a small savings account. If you can leave your 401k, your retirement plan intact, I certainly would recommend you doing that. I understand today's times, it's hard. And if you must take from it, I would say look at where you're going to have the least amount of penalties and potential taxes, because keep in mind, if you withdraw it, you're going to get taxed on it as if it's ordinary income. And you're also going to have a penalty if you're not at the age where you can actually legitimately withdraw it without that penalty. So I would say weigh the pros and cons. If you have a tax advisor that you could inquire with to provide maybe a little more guidance based on your specific financial needs, that would be a great resource for you as well to maybe talk to first.
Excellent. Next question. I'm retired but still working. I have to take a disbursement from my 401k. Can I turn around and reinvestment in the same plan?
So if you have a 401k and you have to do something with it because you retired from that company, you can transfer it and have it be an in-kind transfer to an individual retirement account. So it can go from your company 401k plan to an individual retirement account, which would then allow you to keep it tax deferred and not have to start taking mandatory withdrawals from it until you're 70 and a half if you put it into a traditional. Again, I would say talk to a tax professional. They can give you, for your specific instance and your needs, your particular financial situation, the best route to take. But you probably don't want to take it as a full distribution. You want to keep it tax deferred, because otherwise you take a full distribution from it, you're going to get heavily taxed. Get it rolled over into a 401k or to a retirement plan. You can call your 401k administrator, your HR person, and say, I need to get the paperwork to do a direct rollover, and they will work with you to get that accomplished. And then it can stay tax deferred and you don't get the tax burden all at one time.
Most excellent. Okay, I said we'd get over into the insurance portion, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time, especially with the little game going on. So we'll touch on this one real quick, and this will be our last question.
Okay.
If I get renter's insurance, should I only cover the expensive items like TV and computer, or does the renter's policy cover everything I own?
Well, unfortunately, I probably cannot assist you too much with the correct information on that. I would say I would not be a good resource for the renter's insurance. However, if you have, I think, my email address, and if you'd like to email me your information, I'll be happy to get an answer for you and send that to you directly. I don't handle insurance things, so I would hate to give you incorrect information and put you through the wrong direction there.
No worries at all. We gave it the good college try. And once again,
sorry.
No, that's okay. If anybody needs Kathy's email, once again, if we have any burning questions that weren't covered there just because we're short on time, we have that email address on the screen right there. Is that Kathy.Brown with an E at ks.gov?
That is it.
Most excellent. All right. Well, we're going to invite our other friends back into the fray here. So we'll be rejoined by Marty and Marilyn. Hello.
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 Kathy, thank you for your presentation. That was excellent and
Wonderful.
so full of wonderful information. And Dylan, thank you for your moderation. And I thank you to all who are attending for joining us today. Our next Money Mondays webinar is on October 19th from 6 to 7. Lee Modisette with the Kansas Department of Insurance will present. So that might be a great time to pose that insurance question.
Absolutely.
Future Money Monday webinars will feature HCCI's certified counselors and invited guest speakers. So Marilyn, can you tell us some of the topics we'll hear about from HCCI's counselors?
Absolutely. Yes, our first HCCI speaker will be Ginger. She'll talk on October 26th. She'll talk about credit reports and credit building. And, you know, that credit score is a little bit magical. Not everyone knows how it's calculated. So she'll do her best to try to explain that magical score. And then Rogers, he will talk on Monday, November the 9th, about budgeting. He is our budgeting guru. I can tell you, I spent some time going through that with him this morning through our database, trying to hit every little part of what a budget entails. Plus, we want to remind everybody about the free counseling that we can offer to you. And our toll-free number is 800-383-0217, or you can see it on the slide there. And then, of course, our HCCI counselors have more great topics planned for next year, starting in January through May. And so you can start your new year out right, learning more about money. And then you can always go to the website page to read the detail on the next Money Monday topics. Too many M's there, Marty. And then I should add one more time, thanks again to our incredible sponsors. You know, we've got the State Bank Commissioner, the Kansas Securities Commission, and the Insurance Department. We could not do it without you. I think that's it, right, Marty? I want everybody to have a great week, and we'll see everybody on the next class.
If anyone needs that Women in Money Mondays link, here it is right there. And if you have any questions, that's also in your resource list. So feel free to go ahead and click on it right away. And we'll see y'all next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.